Hi, it's Quinlan. And at last, winter is here again. I am back out in Akita Prefecture, right next door to where I live in Iwate. And today I'm doing sort of a scouting mission on Mount Nyuto. I'm gonna be guiding someone here tomorrow. And so I wanted to check the conditions and make sure everything was okay with the trail since I haven't been out here yet. No one has been out here. And so I am making the trail. In Japanese, they call this raseru, which means making the initial tracks in the snow. It's a lot more energy than walking in someone else's tracks or in snow that's already been trodden down. It is a beautiful day. It's only about -3 degrees Celsius, so I'm loving it. This is my first snowshoeing hike and my first solo winter hike this year, and so I am not in great shape. I am feeling every step. But it's also delicious, delicious, delicious. I mean, look at these beautiful conditions. I recently had the opportunity to visit the United States twice. I spent a solid month there this summer doing family-related things in my hometown of Madison, Wisconsin. And then just recently, in early December, I was lucky enough to be able to get called to do a work trip. This was with the Michinoku Coastal Trail Club, and I went with a small group, and our mission was to meet with the people who are running the Appalachian Trail in the United States and learn from the National Forestry Service, the National Park Service, and the Trail Conservancy Trail Club over there about how they promote, manage, do all these different things related to the trail. Everything from the day-to-day maintenance with volunteers of keeping the trail easy to walk and not just a river of water and mud, down to the branding, publicity, the way people think about it philosophically, the founding, and it was so interesting. I feel really lucky to have been invited. Technically, I went along as an interpreter and also as sort of a member of the team, as I am someone who guides a lot on the Michinoku Coastal Trail, the MCT. Man, I'm tired. I regret forgetting to bring my poles today. I usually do have them with me when I'm snowshoeing, but today I decided to go without them. I didn't think there'd be that much snow, but clearly I was wrong. There it is. We got a beautiful view of the summit of Mount Nyuto, right up there. And look at this pristine snow we've got all around us. I just had a little lunch right here at the Tashirotai Lodge, which is about 80% of the way up the mountain. And I'm gonna play it safe today. It took me 2 hours and 45 minutes, which would usually take me about 1 hour, just going through all this deep snow to get up this far, just to the lodge. And so I'm not going to go to the summit today. I'll just come back tomorrow. It is about -10 degrees right here. But I'm still sweating a little bit from the exertion of coming all the way up here. Since I'm calling this my summit for the day, I have a minute to talk to you about reverse culture shock. I noticed a few things on my recent trips to the States. First is just the normal sort of social thing that you would expect or you would visualize when you think about culture shock. And that is just how friendly and talkative we Americans are to strangers. There were at least 5 occasions where I was making some comment to someone I was with, and someone who I'd never met before, who was just standing nearby or walking by, responded and sort of jumped into the conversation for just a moment. For example, I was mentioning a long line in front of a restaurant and sort of wondering if that restaurant was really good enough to warrant an hour wait, and the person walking by said, "Yeah, it's good food, but you know, I wouldn't wait an hour for it. There's a lot of other good places that don't require a wait." Stuff like that. And I used to always do that myself. It took probably the first 10 years of living in Japan to train that out of me so that I don't randomly won't jump into other people's conversations when they're nearby me and they're talking about something that I know about or have you know, some information that I want to share with them about. And I miss that, though at first I was like, oh, you know, if you're not used to it, it can be a little surprising to have strangers jumping in all the time, and just to have those sort of casual chats with people who are waiting for the subway, waiting in line at the register, before the register at a checkout counter. So that's one thing. Another thing that I wasn't used to was class issues, both in North Carolina as well as in New York City, of course. You encounter a lot of people who are probably unhoused, homeless. I think the correct term is unhoused now, but you know what I mean. People who are basically living on the streets or at least begging for money. And in Morioka, at least where I live now, you do not see that ever. It's pretty cold here and it's a smallish town. It's just not something you see in Morioka. When I was living in Tokyo, of course, I actually was a little bit involved in that issue, in that I used to volunteer at soup kitchens and do a sort of patrol around Ikebukuro area, where we would go with some homeless people and some nurses, and we would walk around to the different parks, hand out newsletter, and the nurse would hand out medicines and just basically check on everyone's safety, because back then there had been some violence against homeless people in the early 2000s in Tokyo. But recently, I haven't had anything to do with that. And so the first thing that happened when we got out of our cab from JFK Airport to our hotel in central Manhattan is there was a woman who at first I thought was having a loud argument with maybe someone on a Bluetooth phone. But no, she was just yelling to anyone and everyone about, I think it was about God and religion of some sort. I mean, she wasn't a fundamentalist, more just raging against the world, I think. And it was, I think, more of a shock for the Japanese people that were with me. For me, they were a little bit confused about what was going on. And then there were several other occasions where there'd be someone walking by just yelling largely about like anarchism or, you know, the government or conspiracy or something like that. And they were just clearly talking loudly. And it was a situation where everybody else walking by would just avoid making eye contact. Don't see that in Japan. So it was a little surprising. There's also little things that are sort of quality of life issues that were kind of irritating to me. And one is that when you're staying in hotels, as I was for 11 days straight, you have to deal with these showers where all you have is like the shower up here and you can't move it, right? It's just water coming out of there. And I'm so used to Japanese bathrooms and showers where you've got the thing, you know, on a hose and you can wash yourself everywhere. And it's just kind of a pain to wash yourself properly when you've just got water coming from up above here. And I am really surprised that so many people maybe live their whole lives just showering that way. Maybe they take baths a lot. It just seems like it's a real pain to wash yourself that way. And if and when I move back to the States, will definitely get one of the kinds where you can wash yourself properly. The other thing, of course, being having the toilet in the same room as the shower seems really inconvenient because obviously it limits the people who can use it at once, and also it just feels dirty, forgive me. And of course, the lack of bidet or washlet, as they call them in Japan, these shower toilets, is, it's a quality of life thing that I really miss. Like, I always sort of compared it to if a bird was sitting on a tree branch above you when you're outdoors in a cafe and it shit on your forearm, would you take a little napkin, wipe that off your arm, and call your arm clean? I don't think so. At least I would go to the bathroom and use water to clean it off. Soap if possible, but at least water. And so, yeah, it's a mystery to me why we just use toilet paper in most Western countries. I'm converted to the Japanese way. Another thing that really had me was how expensive everything is in the States right now. Just lunch in a lot of these places, not only Manhattan, but also in Asheville, in North Carolina, and in a city in central Georgia as well, it was usually $14 to $16 for lunch. And then you got to put a 20% tip on everything, which I'll talk about tips in a second. And wow, in Japanese yen, at the current exchange rate, that means like 3,000 yen-ish for lunch, including tip. That's more than you would pay for dinner. That's dinner with drinks. That's like izakaya, you know, all you can eat, all you can drink. Well, maybe not all you can eat. It's some snacks and all you can drink for that much money. And that's just a little lunch. So yikes. I know Japanese wages are pretty low these days compared to what's in the States, but man, sticker shock. It really had me feeling like I was poor, being surrounded by all these expensive prices, and then dinner, yeesh. Next thing, of course, tips and tipping. Now, I'm born and raised in the United States, and I spent about 6, maybe 8 years, from about 16 years old until when I was 23 or 24, when I moved to Asia, I worked as a waiter. And so I am a good tipper, right? I mean, anybody who's a waiter is generally a good tipper. And I would always tip 20% back in the day when it was supposed to be 15%. But now you go into a cafe, you go into a place that just has counter service everywhere, and they spin the screen around to you, and you choose 18, 20, or 25% tip. And of course, you could hit other and hit no tip or some other amount, but the person's like looking right at you, and I can't help but feeling I don't want to be that jerk who doesn't tip well. And so I kept hitting that 20% tip button, even when it's just something that when I was young, I wouldn't have tipped for or wouldn't have expected that I was even supposed to tip. These rules that have changed now that have made everything a tipping job just made all the prices seem so much more. So that was a bit of a shock for me. Of course, another thing that I don't know if it's really a surprise, but it's always like, oh yeah, that's right, is the food sizes. I've been complaining about how expensive lunches are, but I should say the portions are huge. They are 2 to 3 times as much food as you would be getting for Japanese lunch. When I sometimes eat out, I can often, at least up in Morioka, get lunch for as cheap as 700 yen up to maybe 1,000 or 1,200 yen, and I can get a decent lunch. But the lunch that was costing me $14 to $16 plus tip in the States is about 2 to 3 times as much food. It's a lot. And so traveling for 11 days in early December on this work trip meant eating out basically 3 meals a day. And so I don't even want to know how much weight I probably gained in that time. That's why I'm up here hiking again today. In addition to scouting out this route for tomorrow, I'm also just trying to get a little bit of exercise and work off the extra belly that I probably gained from all that food in the States. One other thing that you might classify as culture shock is some of the changes in the language. When I was living in the States, more than 20 years ago now, geez, we would say, I appreciate it, I appreciate that, or it's all good, it's fine. Now it's, I appreciate you, and you're fine, you're good. And it sounds minor, but at first it was almost a little off-putting. It's hard to explain, but it made me feel weird. And I came to realize that that's just how people talk now, and I need to get over it. I mentioned this to some family members, and they said that when people originally started saying no problem, which for me is absolutely normal, just saying, no problem, that's something I grew up with, and that's fine. But for my parents' generation, they were like, well, why would there be a problem? And they were sort of found the expression no problem off-putting. So that's sort of the same as me finding you're good to sound almost slightly condescending. I don't know. Anyways, that was one little language bit that I found interesting. Of course, the language is always changing, and I'm sure I'm out of date, and my understanding of slang is now sorely lacking. One thing that I wouldn't call a culture shock, but was rather fantastic about being back, was just all of the different kinds of people. Of course, people of all kinds of different races, instead of everyone just being Japanese, basically, and people with really interesting appearances. You know, lots of people with purple hair and green hair, all sorts of facial piercings, in some cases facial tattoos, and things like that. And even people who were working at hotels and restaurants, like the valet at one nice hotel. We actually stayed at a place with valet for a couple nights. It was amazing. And the valets were just like these young guys. They looked like high school or college students. And they had, like hoodies and tattoos and some facial piercings. And they were still able to work as valets at, a nice hotel. In Japan, there'd be people with like white gloves who can't dye their hair, probably can't even have longer hair than like here. It's just so strict in Japan for people's appearances. And of course, you can't go to gyms or do a lot of things if you have tattoos anywhere, not to mention facial tattoos. And so it was nice to see places where you can look how you want to look and still, have a real job. I'm getting cold. It's minus 10 degrees Celsius, and I need to start moving to generate heat again. So I am going to pack up the camera and head back down this volcano. Before I go, I want to remind you that I am still, of course, doing lots of guiding. I do have a website, Go North JP, which has some basic outline of the guiding services I do. But right now, I don't have a really detailed itinerary on there just yet. And so please just fill out the contact form, shoot me an email, or hit me up through an Instagram direct message if you want me to do any guiding during your trip in North Japan. I am doing that now as my full-time job now that tourism is back and in full swing. And I have been having a fantastic time showing people around the mountains up here, the coast, and even some of the towns around here. And so if you are coming to Japan and you would like to have me guide you, please hit me up and I'll see if we can make that work out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the trails.